A 50-year-old journalist has been sentenced to 16 years behind bars for taking bribes to cover up a mine disaster in the northern province of Hebei in July 2008. Junqi, former director of the Farmers Daily Hebei bureau, is believed to be the first of 10 reporters involved in the scandal to be found guilty. 35 people died after a blast ripped through the Lijiawa mine in Yuxian County on July the 14th, 2008, 3 weeks before the start of the Beijing Olympics.
Well, local media reports say that shortly after the blast, mine bosses relocated bodies, destroyed evidence, and paid the journalists the equivalent of $380,000 to cover up the disaster, keeping the tragedy from appearing in newspaper for almost 3 months. A state council investigation into the accident resulted in the prosecution of 48 local officials and 10 journalists. Li was jailed 10 years for taking bribes. Li's lawyer insists his client is innocent and has said he will appeal the verdict in the Supreme People's Court soon.
Now, this isn't the first time journalists have been accused of helping to cover up disasters in exchange for bribes. Last year, 2 journalists and 26 people posing as journalists were accused of accepting bribes to cover up another mine accident in which a worker was killed in Shanxi province. In today's Straight from the Street, we asked people for their reaction to this case and whether or not they trusted journalists. Here's what they had to say.
I heard about the case of the journalists covering up the coal mine blast. I was shocked and could hardly believe it. These people are making money from someone else's tragedy. But I still think it only happens to a small proportion of all journalists who can't resist the strong temptation of money.
I've heard that many journalists take money for writing promotional news for companies or institutes. I have friends who are journalists and they take money from people. Now I'm more skeptical about the news I see every day. I think I can tell whether it's true or not based on my experience and knowledge.
This has something to do with their personal integrity and morality. I believe most journalists are good, and only those who have no respect for their profession would do something like this.
It happens in almost every industry, but the journalists really shouldn't do it. They are supposed to have a keen sense of justice and are supposed to be very objective on serious issues. They are the channel through which ordinary people get to know what's happening in the world. So if these people can't tell the truth, we will never know the facts. It should be a sacred job, but unfortunately, journalists do sometimes take bribes in China.
Now, Sylvia, interesting that one commenter there said, I have friends who are journalists and they take money. Not singular, right, but plural. So one person who knows some journalists and more than one of those takes money in to a certain extent would certainly seem to suggest that this is a problem that is a little bit more widespread than it should be. And certainly that's going to have present problems for the reputation of the industry and the profession in general.